Welcome to the Healing Cocoon. I'm Jacobie Gray, soul alignment and success coach and energy healer, which means I can intuit the subtle layers of your energy field to promote ultimate health and well-being. My goal for this podcast is to shed light on the healing journey itself and help you feel more supported as you embark on the process of unpacking your past to consciously create your present and start living the life of your dreams. Through the study of coaching, kinesiology, holographic kinetics, meditation, Reiki, the chakra system, and many other modalities, I've learned how to release the blocks that were holding me back. Now I'd love to help you do the same. By embarking on your own self-healing process, you'll see the world transforming around you in ways you never thought possible. You'll begin to experience more connection, clarity, love, fulfillment, synchronicity, and success than you've ever had before. So welcome to the Ascension. Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome back to the first Metamorphosis Chat of 2023. This was actually a chat I started recording, I think it must have been almost 2 weeks ago now. When I was still in Nashville, I was packing up my place there. I was about to transition to LA for 6 days before I flew home to Australia, where I then went up to Brisbane to see my university girlfriends. We all went to acting school together. And now I'm back in Sydney, about to travel to Newcastle tomorrow to settle in and begin my IVF journey. So I started recording this amidst the pack down, and I think I was probably a little bit stressed at the time. I was pushing to get this Metamorphosis Chat recorded. I really wanted to kick off early in January. And I knew that people were wanting to know. I mean, I kind of dropped, what do they call it? Clickbait? I mean, I dropped those reels being like, oh, so I've paid for my IVF. And everyone's like, oh my God. And then I went silent. So I'm sorry about the inconsistency there, but I suppose you could say that the emotional journey of IVF is also kind of inconsistent. So the sharing of the journey is probably a good indication of where my headspace is at any given time. So I'm back in Australia. It's summer and it's just gorgeous. I'm so happy to be home right now, wrapping myself up in friends, and I'm really excited to see my family tomorrow. So this Metamorphosis Chat is actually in two parts, so you may hear a difference in the recording because one part was recorded partly 2 weeks ago, and then the second half I am recording right now. So if you do hear a bit of a difference definitely in my overall tone, because I think there was an element of feeling a little bit stressed as well with the big move. I mean, not that just to clarify, I'm not moving back to Australia permanently, but I was moving out of my place and organizing storage and had to figure out, this is something you don't think about. Where do you leave your car when you go away for extended periods of time? I was looking for garages to rent, and in the end, my roommate was amazing, and we came to an arrangement that I could store all my stuff in her attic, and she would maintain my car while I was away. And so when I get back, I can find my own place, which I feel really ready for and I'm super excited about. And hopefully I'll be creating a nest for me and my baby. All right, so without further ado, let's get into this IVF Metamorphosis Chat. So in 2018, I was going through my divorce, and it was a very amicable divorce. It was initiated in January. It was finalized by June. I think as far as divorces go, I can say it was a pretty, I don't want to say painless, but it definitely was very smooth. And the process itself catapulted me into a big healing journey, and also a lot of fear. As my marriage was dissolving, I knew that it was a big risk to be leaving to be separating at a point when we probably should have been starting a family. And obviously this is not a concern for my ex because he's a man and there's no time limit. But for me, I knew there was a risk. But I also knew that bringing a family into the world and the place where we were emotionally wasn't going to be healthy. And I couldn't see how we would find a way to connect deeply enough in order to sustain our marriage for a long period of time and therefore, or forever, and therefore would end up in the same situation that I ended up in with my originating family, the one I was born into, which is a broken home. So that's not something I wanted to do, and we both wanted to give each other the chance to find a love that we both felt would walk us into being able to create the families of our dreams. So, and happy to say that that has worked out for my ex, and he's found his soulmate twin flame, and who knows when they'll start a family, but they're very happy on their journey together. And so I was really glad to see that he was remarried and that his life has moved forward in that direction, and my life has also moved forward in that direction. But I just had a hell of a lot of healing and trauma that I needed to clear. I thought I was leaving my marriage just to find a more suitable partner, but actually I was leaving my marriage to find myself. And that's probably what most people who go through divorce, if they don't immediately just plug into a new partner and recreate the same situation, or, immediately find a new partner and grow through that new partner into a more elevated relationship than their original marriage. But most people, I think, who experience a divorce go through a huge healing process. And mine was particularly huge because, first of all, you confront the trauma itself. But what I think I didn't realize, I always knew, there's this thing that's happened to me and it's very defining. But what I didn't realize is after I worked through that, the next layer of healing is actually to become conscious of and break down or replace with something more positive the mindset or the mental blueprint for me that was created through the trauma. So there was a lot of low self-worth, essentially, that caused a lot of anxious attachment and a lot of other sort of issues that I have a lot of grace for myself now when I look back through my story, which I do plan to just write one day, either through a film or maybe a book. But it's kind of been one long extended trauma. I'm in a great place now, and there's definitely been like highlights in my life for sure, like a lot of joy, a lot of love, a lot of friendship, a lot of support. But when I look at the things I've surmounted in my life, I'm not surprised that I have ended up in a place where I'm having a baby on my own because I had a lot of mental programming that didn't allow me to bring in a partner in time to do this. So I'll be 43 on the 7th of May this year. So check it in your calendars and send me a little birthday wish. I'm just kidding. But so in 2018, when the ex-hubs and I decided to call it quits, I kind of went into freak out mode and decided that I should freeze my eggs. And this process was done under a lot of stress and with a lot of fear. And it was kind of a crazy process. They put me on the pill for 3 weeks so that I could take Cinerol, which is a nasal spray. And the nasal spray's job is to basically deplete you of all hormones so that you essentially go into a menopausal state, so that when they jack you up with all the injections, when you're doing the actual egg retrieval, you don't kind of go, it doesn't elevate your hormone levels to such a point where you go crazy at the other end. But for me, I haven't been on the pill in, probably 10 to 15 years. It never agreed with me. It was something that being as sensitive as I am, I just couldn't deal with having this chemical dictate my body. I'm much more comfortable when I am
in tune with my natural rhythms. So first of all, I was on the pill. Then I went on the Cinerol. And to be honest, that dumping me into that state of like menopause, it fucked with me big time. Way more than when I took the actual like injections to do the egg retrieval. It was really intense. And initially, the Cinerol wasn't working and it wasn't reducing my hormone levels. And so I went into the clinic to get a check to see if it was time to sort of go off the pill and initiate a period so that then I could begin the actual egg sort of retrieval process. And they were all very shocked. The nurses were like, oh, something's not right here. Your hormone levels are sustaining even though you've been on this nasal spray. They're literally overriding the nasal spray. We think you might be pregnant. And I was like, holy shit. Now, it was possible because I'd been in LA. There was a guy I was seeing. We'd been together right before I left. And by the time I'd started this whole process, there was potential that I could have been pregnant time-wise in the timeline. So me already being in this really intense space emotionally because of this nasal spray, and suddenly discovering that I was potentially already pregnant, which was obviously a huge spanner in the works, but to someone that I, barely knew. And I mean, we'd kind of been exploring each other, but it was by no means anything serious. And I was devastated that I would even potentially have, not me personally, but I guess I didn't want to involve someone else or put them into this position where we created something in a really unconscious way. I was kind of like heartbroken. I couldn't even think to how I was going to have the conversation with this person. It was very intense. And I had a whole night and 24 hours of fretting, deeply fretting. And remember, I was already like in a very hectic space because of the drugs. It was pretty dark. And then the next morning I woke up and I just meditated and I calmly put my hands over my belly and I talked to the baby and I said, okay, kid, no matter what happens, no matter what unfolds, it's you and me. I promise you I've got this and we will walk forward together, and no matter what happens, I will be the best mother I possibly can to you. And suddenly this peace washed over me. This peace washed over me, and in that moment, something aligned in me. And I knew that with my mind, heart, body, and soul, I wanted to be a mother. So then I go back into the clinic and they do some more tests and they're like, oh, okay, sorry, we got that wrong. You're not pregnant. You've just got a strong hormonal constitution, and we're just going to keep you on the Cinerol, the nasal spray, for another few more days, and your levels should drop enough to start the injections. And then suddenly I wasn't pregnant. And then, of course, that then sent me into a spin, kind of having gone through this hectic emotional crisis and coming to a place of acceptance, like deep and profound acceptance, and almost then excitement that I didn't even have to go through with this like egg retrieval process. And I was like, wow, this is the beginning of the rest of my life. And then suddenly it wasn't. And I look back now and I think that this needed to happen because although I always knew I wanted a family, and clearly I was going through this egg retrieval process because I wanted to freeze my eggs so that I could have a family, I'd never consciously gone, it's time, I want this. Like, I was always very focused on my career. My ex-husband and I had an incredible fun, hedonistic relationship. We had a great life. Like, we knew we wanted kids in the future, but neither one of us in the whole 13 years we were together ever looked at each other and said, should we start trying? I think maybe on some level we knew that wasn't part of our journey. I don't know. But I'd never actually gone, this is what I want, even though I knew it was what I want. Anyway, that process, I think, needed to happen, as hellish as it was, because in that moment I fully aligned and I was like, I want this. So I go through the egg retrieval process, stressed out of my fucking mind, going through a divorce and then thinking I was pregnant and not pregnant and all of the drugs, and yeah, it was a lot. And so anyway, we got 3 eggs, which isn't a lot. They say for someone my age, it's potentially standard. I was 38 at the time. I think there was an expectation of a few more eggs. But I believe that stress and potentially there is something genetically. A few people in my family have struggled to fall pregnant and have had sort of have maybe earlier menopause and things like that. So there could be something hereditarily there as well. So anyway, I get these 3 eggs on ice and I then I go back to LA. I've done this egg retrieval process in Australia. And I then embark on my new life as newly divorced, as knowing that I definitively wanted a family and I was ready for it, and wanting to meet the person that I could do that with. However, I didn't understand exactly how much trauma and how that trauma was playing out in my life that I needed to work through. And I was blessed, now I see, to have certain guys come into my life where these patterns could be revealed and these traumas could sort of play out in the cycles that I think I'd been protected from while I was in my very safe and secure marriage, where we didn't really touch on anything too deep emotionally. But I brought some people in who really opened up my heart space, and I fell in love, and I got to explore some of the darker sides of my trauma and attachment issues. Not that consciously at the time I knew that, but I definitely, as you know, I work with energy healers and I have a lot of support systems. And so as things would come up, I would go and clear. But then I would continue to engage with these people and new things would come up, and then I would go and clear. And then I would continue to engage and then new things would come up and I would go and clear. And so I was very conscious in the way that I was using these experiences to clear my trauma. However, I still was very much in a victim mentality and living that out over and over again. So I really tried dating and it didn't work. And then 2020 came and I got ejected back to Australia, where I was like, okay, maybe this was all meant to be. Maybe I'm meant to come home, be near my family, meet a nice guy, settle down, raise my babies near their cousins, be with my sisters and all my high school friends who already have their kids. And so I bought an apartment and I really committed. When I was in Brisbane visiting friends, I would jump on the apps and I would try and date. When I was in Sydney visiting friends, I would jump on the apps and I would try and date. When I was in Newcastle, where I lived, I would jump on the apps and I would try and date. And I met beautiful humans, and I had some experiences, and didn't really work out. It just didn't work out. But one of the experiences was quite impacting because it triggered 2 very important events. The closure of me dating someone in particular who was probably the closest person I'd met to maybe recreating the life I had with my ex-husband, but in hopefully a more expanded way. That ended when I realized he himself was not fully divorced and he was very protective of his daughter, as he should be. And I realized there was not going to be an integration anytime soon of our lives, because he was still unpacking his life with his young daughter and protecting her through his own divorce. And through the breakdown of that sort of, it wasn't long, maybe 2 months of dating, it initiated a very deep healing with my mother, where a lot of stuff from the past finally came up, and we went through therapy and we went in. We only had 3 sessions, but it was enough. But it was a very deep, dark time as we revisited some demons. But we came out the other side, and that was me finally going in and getting closure, literally 30 years after the fact. It was very healing. It was very hard. And I will at some point go into that. It's a very personal journey for both my mum and I. So it's not, I still haven't figured out how to talk about that without, exposing us. But the other thing that happened through that process is that one of my university friends, a dear, dear friend, dropped in to visit me. He wanted to have an energy session, and we're chatting. And I was telling him how I was dating this guy, but this guy, he had a vasectomy. However, he told me that it was reversible, and so I guess if we were kind of going to be together, then that would be sort of something we'd need to take into account if we were going to build a family, things like that. But I was also aware that I was feeling like this probably wasn't going to work out. And by this stage, this is 2020, I had gone through a series of devastating heartbreaks in LA, come home to Australia, and really not connected after dating quite hard, and was starting to get to a point where I was like, okay, I'm now 40, pushing 41, and I think it might be time for me to start consider doing this on my own. And so he and I are chatting, and I'm like, I'm thinking about maybe, I don't know, going for it on my own. And he was telling me how he also had a vasectomy through events that had happened in his life. He'd just decided that, having children and partnership, and he was just career focused, and for whatever reasons had decided that, children potentially weren't on the radar for him. Anyway, we had a really beautiful time together. It was great reconnecting from our acting days back in Brisbane when we were both at uni. And a few days later, after he left, I get a text from him saying, you know what, Jack, if this IVF journey is something you choose to do, and if you felt that I might have the right genetics for you, that you'd consider that, I would love to have a chat with you about embarking on this adventure with you. And I burst into tears. And I'm emotional just thinking about it now, because I remember I'd sat down and had a moment talking to the spirit of my unborn child. And I just said, look, please bring me your genetics. I don't mind if it's through a loving partner, if it's through a known donor, a friend, or if it's an unknown donor. You guide me and I will surrender into the process. So when my friend just texted me this out of the blue, I was shocked and touched, freaked out, and like, holy shit, this is it. Overwhelmed as well, deeply overwhelmed. And I wrote back just saying, wow, this is the most incredible gesture. Because he'd said, if anyone deserves to be a mum, Jack, it's you, and I would love to support you on that journey. And I said, thank you so much. I think I just said, thank you so much. I didn't know what to say. Anyway, time passed, a few weeks passed. I needed to process this. And he was coming back through, I think he was shooting a film or a TV show or something in Sydney. So he was coming down from Queensland again through Newcastle on his way to Sydney. And he dropped in and for another session. And I was like, hey, would you be open to discussing that text message? And he said, oh, yes, I've been waiting for you to bring this up. And I'm very grateful for how sensitive he was around this, and that he didn't push, and that he let me find my way, because it has been a big process for me. But he said, I've I've talked to my parents about this and potentially even a few close friends, and I've really, this is something I really want to do. And I guess for me, I wanted to have a baby consciously, and to have someone sitting opposite me who was very consciously choosing this, and who had also been processing this and speaking to people he respected and asking for advice, and potentially even saying, how would you feel about this as my family? And to hear that he was already so on board with this was a huge relief, a gift, and also, again, very scary. So I said, well, let's do this. Let's initiate this and see what happens. So I called the clinic, Janaea, in Newcastle, and I said, all right, I have a sperm donor officially, and I want to begin this process. So the first few steps are that we needed to do counseling, an individual session each with the clinic, plus then a joint counseling session. We needed to do genetic testing. So there was a lot of steps. And by this stage, I'd broken up with this last guy. I'd gone through this healing process with my mum, and I was headed back to LA. So by the time I was in LA, we'd pretty much, I think we just needed to have our group counseling session. The genetic test came back like ridiculously perfect. There's 0.03% of us having any kind of genetic difficulties in any of the known ways. I don't think it rules out things like Down syndrome or anything like that happens if there's a deformity with the egg itself. But in terms of us genetically combining to create cystic fibrosis or any known disease like that, we are in the clear.
I'm jumping in here because I want to ask you a question. Have you ever considered coaching and energy clearing as an option to support your personal healing journey? We often turn to therapy for unpacking the past, but what about what you want to create for your future? Coaching is a great tool for defining the action steps that will move you forward, and energy clearing removes the resistance to those action steps. So my unique offering, called The Blend, which is a combination of the two, can be complementary to your deep dive into past traumas with your therapist, or used as a tool on its own to radically strip away the energetics that no longer serve you, so you can consciously define the parameters of your life. Because most people's lives are defined by the parameters of their mind, not the other way around. Coaching and energy clearing makes conscious what is unconscious, so that you no longer are a servant to your outdated protective programming, noisy thought patterns, family energetics, and whatever else is going on inside your mind. So if you'd like to learn more about the blend and how it could support you transitioning into a more fulfilled version of yourself and your life, go to our website, which is also listed in the show notes of this episode, at www.urbanascension.co, that's .co, not .com, and schedule a free half-hour discovery call with me, because I would love to chat about what's holding you back and how I can help you move forward. So it's June of 2021 and I land back in LA. I think I'm only going for 3 months to get a re-entry permit so that I can spend more time outside of the US, which gives me the ability to go home and have my baby. Because with a green card, you can't be outside of the country for longer than a year. Otherwise, they reserve the right to take the green card off you. So I was doing a special process that was going to give me 2 years grace outside of the US. However, once I landed, like 2 weeks later, Australia went into its really heavy lockdown period, which meant I couldn't get back into the country. Flights were heavily reduced. I think planes were carrying like 30 passengers each. There were people all over the world trying to get back to Australia. And it was going to cost me, flights went from like $1,000 up to $14,000 overnight. It was kind of crazy. So I was like, okay, well, looks like I'm here for a bit longer. So I started tripping around. And as you know, I have chatted about that on previous podcasts, about how I came to this was, I guess, how Nashville unfolded, because I wasn't I wasn't, yeah, like staying in LA. Normally I had a home there, and so I wouldn't think to go anywhere else. But this time I didn't, and I knew I had an extended period in the country, and I thought, well, let me trip around and see some other places. And I got to love Nashville through that process. But something that happened was I three very wonderful men stepped into my life between June of 2021 and October 2021. And two were friends who suddenly presented as more, and one was a complete stranger who I met when I moved to Nashville for a month. Um, but all of them were potential uh, lovers, love interests. They were all incredible men, creative, intelligent, good looking, really, each in their own ways, really a perfect partner for me. However, there is a caveat. All three of them were either one of them didn't want a relationship and didn't want children, and two of them wanted a relationship but didn't want children. And I, you know, this is all part of my unavailable man programming, which I'm going to do an episode on because I'm really passionate about helping women break free from the shackles of an unavailable man pattern, because it has hampered me for the last 6 years since my divorce. I was not expecting to continually call in unavailable partner after unavailable partner after unavailable partner. But of course, looking back now, what does that identify? That is a reflection of the unavailability in me. Of course, I didn't think I was unavailable. I was like, I'm ready. I want to fall in love. I want to have a baby. But my unconscious programming said otherwise. My low self worth patterning, which came from my trauma, needed to be addressed. And the universe was using these unavailable men as a way of helping me to grow through that, shall we say. So it's been a journey, and I will absolutely address that at a later date. But right now, I think how this impacts my IVF journey is that I suppose I was still open. I was still, until I got to the point where I was at the clinic door about to start the injections. Of course, I was still open to meeting, I mean, it sounds so romantic, the man of my dreams, and falling in love and having the opportunity to build a family with them. Because um, in my heart, I still, I suppose, subscribed to the very nuclear way that I'd been brought up, that most people in society are believing in and existing within, and for good reason. Raising a child is tough. It's tough for two people. It's going to be even tougher for one. I am fully aware that I will be playing mom, dad, breadwinner, nurturer. Plus, I also have my own career aspirations and my creative needs and desires that need to be fulfilled, plus all of my energy healing. So I'm fully and completely aware of how difficult this will potentially be, being a single mother. And it reminds me, if you're Australian and you're around my age group, there was this ad for Centrelink, which back in the day it was called something else, SEC, or I can't even remember now. But back in the day, there were these ads for welfare, essentially. And there was this woman on the ad, and she had a really Australian accent. And it was something that all my friends and I would constantly say to each other. It became kind of a meme before memes existed visually. It was a verbal meme. And this lady would say, I'm a single mother with a daughter. And it was, obviously, this is not a laughing matter. It is hard to be a single mother with a daughter. And I am aware, painfully aware, that that is what I'm choosing to step into. And who knows, I may well end up living at home with my mum on welfare. I don't see that happening. In fact, it's not going to happen. But look, it's a possibility. What if I have a child with special needs? What if, um, or they have some kind of medical requirements that I just, can't financially support? Or there's so many things that I'm really aware that taking this journey on my own could bring challenges that could be brought into my life. So I absolutely was still open to embarking on this journey with a partner. The other thing I really wanted and was painfully aware of was that through the process of pregnancy, I will be at my most beautiful, feminine, and vulnerable. And through that process, I mean, I've heard you have the best sex of your life when you're pregnant with all those hormones running around your body. And I'm like, and the thing is, I also see this as a very sacred act. I don't want to just go out and sleep with anyone so I can have the experience of having the great sex that you have when you apparently have when you're pregnant. I wanted to do that in a sacred union. And I wanted that to be me and my partner exploring my beautiful, growing, changing body. And look, even that could be romantic. I have people in my life who suffer from that same, I can't remember the name of it and I apologize, but it's the same thing that Amy Schumer had on her Netflix special. It's where they are vomiting their entire pregnancy. And I'm sure, and hospitalized repeatedly. And it's a really challenging process that they're going through. And so I'm aware that maybe I'm even romanticizing the pregnancy aspect of it, that even that element might not be this beautiful thing that I'm hoping it will be. But you know what? It also could be. And so until I'm in it, we're not going to know. And so I'm shooting for the silver lining. So something I was sad about was the fact that I wouldn't have a masculine energy when I was at my most feminine. And I understand that there are many ways that people come together to create safety and security in relationships, and women come together, and men come together. I am just speaking for me, and I embody a very feminine energy, and I happen to be in a female body. And I am naturally attracted to masculine energies that are inhabited in male bodies. It's different for everybody, but I'm just saying what my hopes and desires and dreams were. And so that was something I was like, wow, I'm going to go through this birthing experience and I'm not going to have you hear all those stories about how, these women, they like were screaming and then they bit their partner in like their hand or their chest because they were in so much pain. Like, I'm not going to feel like I can bite my mum or my best friend. It's like, and again, it's such a programming, isn't it? This whole gender thing, and what women and men can do and take on that physical plane. But I, yeah, I just really wanted that masculine energy there to support me through this journey. And so that was something I also had to come to terms with and let go of. And as I've been focusing more on the beauty of sisterhood and gathering women around me through this, and let's face it, at the end of the day, men are generally helpless in the corner, just kind of patting their wife and like trying to anticipate her needs, but also getting yelled at. And whereas I think women are much more intuitive, and having experienced women in the birthing suite with me will also be a beautiful advantage, and they can help coach me through something that they've lived through themselves. So, all of this is to say that there's been a lot that I've had to get my head around through this process. And so, yes, I absolutely was 100% up for meeting someone before I really locked into this. And then, of course, I was also aware that I was continually calling in these unavailable men. Now, one by one, I had a beautiful experience with each of these men that played out, of course, in the way that only an unavailable pattern can play out, with us not ending up together. Uh, and I laugh about it now, but it's been painful because it's been 6 long years of heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak. But guess who was doing it to themselves? It was me. But of course, I didn't see that. I didn't understand. And this is, now I'm grateful for this experience. But inside of it, absolutely, I was kicking and screaming and cursing the universe and being like, this is not fair. Every day, people are meeting. Like, my ex had 2 girlfriends and now a wife within the 6 years. Like, what the fuck? Like, I have not even been able to have something like a dalliance that's kind of even remotely looked like something together with a man for even 3 months. And so it, yeah, the thing that I learned through this process is that it's one thing to go back and address the traumatic events and free yourself from the energies that are locked inside those events. But if there's a great deal of time between the addressing of the event and the event itself, there's a lot of mental programming that's created around an event, um, which then defines how you live your life. And so these things that happened to me when I was 10, plus now, if you will listen to the 2022 wrap up, you'll know that um, I had, yeah, some birth trauma and some stuff that probably happened to me, well, not happened to me, but just some birth trauma around, my mum going into shock when she had me. And therefore, instead of getting oxytocin releases, her body literally was in physical medical shock and ultimately rejecting me. And then, of course, postnatal depression. And things like that, which then basically just meant that me as a baby experienced abandonment issues. Plus, then as I grew, some more things happened to me. And then all of these things just compounded to create a low self worth mindset that didn't believe I could create a healthy, safe love. It's why my marriage didn't work out. It's why I haven't been able to call in a partner to do this baby thing with. And so I'm kind of like jumping the timeline backwards and forwards here. I know I'm kind of going everywhere. But if I track back now to when I'd arrived in LA, I'm tripping around. I'm all these different places, having a great time. Then we get to December 2021, and it's time for my sperm donor to go in for his extraction because, as I mentioned, he'd had a vasectomy. And I mean, this is how incredible is this? Like, I feel so blessed. This is not even someone that I care about saying, hey, I'll jack off into a cup for you. This is someone that I care about, a very dear friend who has said, this means so much to me that I will actually go and have a syringe into my nuts to have the sperm extracted so that we can do this process. Like, it's an incredible, selfless act. And I feel so incredibly blessed. But there's something about, I think, for me, making a payment for something that seems to activate me, because it happened when I paid for this sperm extraction. I went into meltdown, which is exactly the same as when I paid for the paid for my IVF last December, or maybe it was the end of November. But I went into meltdown, and you know what it is? It's the power of commitment through the process of paying. And it's not cheap, let me tell you. Like, it's not like, oh, okay, yeah, it's like $500, so oh well, if I decide not to do it, big deal. Like, it's big money, IVF. So yeah, of course, I'm sure there's always a way out, but like, it's a real commitment. So paying for these 2 things for me was my yes, I'm doing this. And as a result, then the universe is like, all right, we need to clear out anything that is going to stand in the way of you creating and manifesting this dream for yourself. So the two times that I've actually laid down the cash, I've gone through pretty big up leveling experiences emotionally to get me into the space where I can step into this and embrace this. So as you know, I then so by December 2021, I have sperm. My donor and I have done all the genetic testing. We've done all the counseling. Everything is ready to go. I'm still in America because I can't get home yet. But knowing that I have the security blanket of, I suppose, this IVF, it's given me the mental space to be able to explore these three unavailable guys, not necessarily at my leisure, but it's allowed me to see these things through to their organic end without the pressure of even needing, I think previously it was like, well, I need this to work, like, because I want to have a baby. I was that girl that desperate, like, I mean, not entirely desperate, but definitely it was a motivating factor for my desire to step into deep commitment very quickly. So, okay, sorry, I keep losing my train of thought because I'm talking around and around. So let me look at my notes. Right. So by February 2022, I have decided I'm moving to Nashville. And I'm like, right. And I think all of these things have been covered in How I Became an Energy Healer, parts 1, 2, and 3. So if you're wondering about my journey prior to this and things that I'm referencing, you can go back and listen to those and get the full download. I feel like this episode, it probably should be in 3 parts too. But if you're still listening, thank you. So February 2022, I'm in Chicago and I'm like, I'm moving to Nashville. And off I go. I head home to Newcastle. I sell up my apartment because at this stage I was able to, I ended up ultimately, I could get back into Australia. Flights had kind of opened up again as long as you were vaccinated. So I did end up getting the J&J, which is the 2-shot vaccination. I will reserve my opinions on being vaccinated because I'm sure you know I have them. But they are in conflict to the fact that I did actually get vaccinated. But you know what? Once I was on a mission, I was on a mission, and at some point I'll talk about what I did to protect myself from the harmful side effects on an energetic level, and then also once I had it, how I was able to clear it from my system. But at some point I'll talk about that. But I got the J&J, which didn't have any mRNA technology, 2 shots in one, headed home to Australia, sold up all my stuff, moved back to Nashville. And the plan was, right, I am going to build a nest. I'm going to get set up, go home in December. I'm going to get knocked up, and then I'm going to come back and begin my life with Babe here in Nashville, building Urban Ascension and the podcast. And so begins my life as a single mother. And also, yeah, actually, no, I won't talk about that now because I will address it at the end. It's a mindset, right? Even the way I just said, and so begins my life as a single mother. There's a tonality to that is still a little bit victimized, right? Anywho, coming back around, as you know, if you listen to the 2022 wrap up, I had a kind of wild 6 months that I wasn't anticipating, and particularly in Nashville between July and December. I had a lot of stuff going down on the spiritual plane, which kind of was a bit of a setback. And during this time when I was disconnected from spirit, I started to wane on my desire to even have children. I felt I was in quite a space of hopelessness. And for the first time, I started to actually consider not having children. And I do believe this also was a really important part of the process, because I was like, okay, maybe I can have a life without children. And that, of course, working through that was pretty intense. But at the same time, it gave me freedom, because now when I go through this IVF process, it may or it may not work, but I've actually addressed the grief. And I'm sure if it doesn't work, there will be more grief, but I've actually addressed the grief of not having children. So initially, I'm driven by the fear of not having them, and that's driving me, driving me, driving me, driving me. Then, when I actually sat and looked at what was driving me, the fear, once I actually went, well, what would it look like if I don't have children? And I found a way to become okay with that. That then released a whole bunch of energy. And I went on a retreat in October, a yoga retreat, where I reconnected with all of my beautiful yoga friends and I found my soul again. And I went to LA, and I have a friend who is, now, this is, guys, this is the way the universe works. The universe will use whatever it can to send you messages. When it wants to send you a message, it is going to send you a message through whatever channel it can. So I have a friend who shoots the Kardashians. She's one of their photographers. And uh, although obviously NDAs up the wazoo, cannot ever speak about anything that happens on set, there's a generality, there's a way that she can speak about it without disclosing any information. It's just like, oh yes, I was at work today and X, Y, and Z. But I have never watched the Kardashians, like ever. And I was like, geez, this is such a cultural phenomenon. And I'm sure everyone has their opinions, and I never would have watched it. But talking to my friend about it and realizing they're kind of just humans too, it kind of piqued my interest. So I watched one episode, the first episode of the new season. I think they've got two now of this new season. They took a break from their previous 21 seasons, keeping up with the Kardashians, and I think now it's just called The Kardashians. So I watched episode 1 of the first season on the plane on the way home to Nashville. And I kind of liked it because it reminded me of LA. Obviously the glitz and the glamour. There is a lot to LA, but living in Nashville, it's a very different city. It's a very different life. And some part of me felt a little bit, I don't know, felt closer to LA through watching it. And I do have to admit, one of my guilty pleasures is selling Sunset. Before G Flip started dating Chrishell. But now that G Flip is dating Chrishell, I am like, because I love G Flip. I absolutely adore her. Her album got me through 2020, locked down in my own apartment, all on my own in Hollywood. So anyway, that's a little bit of an aside. But what I'm trying to tell you is that yes, I'm very spiritual and hippie and woo woo and all the things, but also I love a bit of like trashy glitz and glamour. It's probably why I love LA so much. So I watch this first episode, and when I get home, I decide to just kind of keep watching it. And I got two things from this. Obviously, and I didn't really realize this, Khloe, Kourtney, and Kim are all similar ages to me. And something that I learned about Kris Jenner is that she didn't actually build her empire. I mean, she was obviously married with money to the lawyer of O.J. Simpson and all of that story. But once she started managing her Jenner husband, sorry, I'm butchering this. I'm not really across this. As you can tell, I'm not a huge fan. But she didn't start her career until she was 40. Like her, in terms of managing her Olympian husband and her girls, and then creating, the Kylie and Kendall, and then managing their careers, that didn't even start until she was 40. And I found that kind of inspiring because I was like, wow, look at what she's created essentially from my age right now to where she is, which is, I guess, 60 something. And I was like, God, life's not over. It's only just beginning. So that was something kind of inspiring that I got from Kris Jenner. But here's the thing. I'm watching these seasons, and Kourtney, I think, is going through IVF with Travis Barker, and I think she's the eldest, so she's like 43 or 44, and she already has her kids. He already has his kids, but they're madly in love and they want to create their own family. And so these guys, with all the money in the world, best doctors, they've gone off to do Pachacama Ayurvedic treatments, like they're vegans, they're doing all the things, and they're trying and trying and trying, and they're not having any luck with Courtney's eggs because of her age. In the same time, something's going down with Chloe, and she can't carry her baby. And I know there's been a lot of drama with her and her ex-partner or baby daddy, but for me, the thing that was standing out is that she couldn't carry. And then Courtney's eggs. And I'm watching this, and these things are happening. And I'm sitting there, I'm just watching it. At the same time, a very close friend of mine is going through IVF. And it was this moment where everything conspired. And Courtney's there talking about how her retrievals aren't working and they're trying everything. Chloe's there. I mean, sorry if I'm mixing up these names. Chloe's there talking, having a baby via surrogacy. And then my friend texts me to say she'd had an unsuccessful round of IVF. This is like all in the same moment. And it was like, oh shit, I'm 42. If I want a chance at this, I kind of got to start now. Like, it's now, Jacobie. It's now. It's not, oh yeah, maybe I'll give it another 6 months and let me see if I can call in yet another unavailable man that I can like put all my eggs into one basket, pun intended. It just hit me in that moment. I was like, oh, right, universe, loud and clear. I see it. It's time. It is absolutely time. And when I decide to do something, I absolutely decide to do it. And so that was it. I called up the clinic, I laid down the money, and as you know, I initiated a whole other healing process that was required. Now I see to shed me of, ironically, the unavailable man patterning, which was really a symptom of my self-worth issues. And probably also, there was a contract. I remember making it when I was 21. I remember I was standing in the backyard of my home in Brisbane at drama school, and we had a hill as our back lawn, and I'm pegging out my laundry, and my grandpa had just passed. And my grandpa, oh God, I loved him, loved, loved, loved him. And he and my grandma had been together forever. And, she didn't drive and she didn't pay the bills. And it was a very old school, traditional British relationship. And when grandpa passed, grandma just was willing herself to die also. Actually, grandpa passed a couple of years earlier. I think it was the experience of watching my grandma essentially trying to die, even though she was pretty much perfectly healthy, and just through mentally vacating. And she ultimately got dementia and passed that way. But I honestly believe she called that in and created it because she didn't know who she was without him. And I remember seeing that and going, I will never do that. I will never be so dependent on a man that I want to die if he dies. And so, yeah, then I went on to ultimately create a very independent marriage. So independent, in fact, that we couldn't emotionally find our way back to each other when things kind of got tough there at the end. So there were many things, many, 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 many things contributing to the reason why I was stuck in this unavailable man cycle and was ultimately having a baby on my own. But the interesting thing, guys, and this is where I'm going to wrap it up, I promise. Thank you for listening this whole time to me rambling. But the interesting thing is, through this process, the healing that I was called to go through and clear, ultimately, I was like, oh, this whole IVF thing has been driven from fear and has come from a place of low self-worth, of me believing I'll never, or I'm not worthy of creating a relationship and a family. Just that, yeah, that's the end of the story. I was about to say of my dreams, but actually, no, not even of my dreams, just a normal family, But it was through paying for the IVF, all of the healing experiences that it initiated that then cleared me. And I was like, of course I can call in a loving partner and create a family. Of course I can. Then suddenly I was alleviated of the need to even do IVF. But ironically, I'd paid for it and set it all up. So all of this is to say, it's choosing to have a baby on your own. Like going through IVF is difficult enough with a partner. Doing it on your own and the process of coming to terms with the fact of being a single mother as well, for me, I think I wanted to make, now that I'm clear, I just want to make sure that I am making this choice from an empowered place and not from a low self-worth program that doesn't believe I'm worthy of building a family with a partner. So that is where I want to leave this, because this choice now, finally, after this long 6-year journey from when I first felt compelled to freeze my eggs during my IVF, during my divorce, and then thinking I was pregnant during that process, which then naturally activated me into going, oh no, I want a family. And then I feel like I've emotionally explored every single angle of doing this on my own. It's just something I seem to do. I do everything the hard way, but it's so that I have the ability to relate to other people and can then coach and help them through their challenges, because I'm like, well, there's pretty much nothing I haven't done. Of course, there's many things I haven't experienced, and I don't want to detract from other people's really hardcore dramas, because as much as my situation has felt very impacting to me, I'm also aware that it's full of a lot of privilege and a lot of support that other people don't get in this lifetime. So I am now in a position where I'm going to meet my doctor on the 8th of February, and then my next period is due at the end of February. So we will be beginning the process. I am really excited about the next chapter of my life now. Having traversed all of the ups and downs of it, I really feel that either this will work and be the beginning of a beautiful new journey with my little soul child, or if it doesn't work, I will accept it as the closure of a low self-worth cycle. And it's not the end. That's the thing. I don't see that if I've decided I'll do 2 rounds of egg retrieval, and if it doesn't work, it's not the end. I could adopt. I may meet someone in the future who has their own children. I still may fall pregnant naturally at some point. I may choose to do IVF with someone later on, or I might even choose to do IVF again in a year or 2. Who knows, guys? But I guess what I'm saying is I feel really empowered now in this decision. There is no stone left unturned, and it will be what it is. It's in the hands of the universe now. I am surrendered, and forward I step into the rest of my life. I hope this episode has inspired you to keep going on what can sometimes be a tough road to inner peace and true happiness. If you want to dive deeper into what we talked about today, go to thehealingcocoon.co for show notes and all things personal growth. And don't forget, if you're loving The Healing Cocoon, then put that love into action and subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcasts. And until next time, my friends, let's rise and shine together.